Hello, my name is Trevor Pacelli, and just 2 months ago, my dad and I just did a talk about 10 ways to mess up as a dad. We spoke about this in front of 200 men at our church, and I would like to share this message with you today. So throughout this talk, I would like to bring up the acronym mess-ups. The first way to mess up as a dad is through the M of mess-ups, which stands for mother. In other words, doing the opposite of what mom says. So let's say that when you're a father, your kids want to go see a movie, and your mom has seen previews of it, and she's seen reviews of it, and she's seen the content level of it, and she tells the kids, no, I don't want you seeing it, but the dad disagrees. He thinks, yeah, sure, why not? Let the kids go see it. So when mom is out, the dad takes the kids, he takes them to see the movie, and they come home without mom ever knowing. Now, how do you think the mom will feel when she finds out? So the dad's opinion is not really the only one that matters in this situation. One thing to really keep in mind is that the mother and the father are in a real partnership together, and they're in that commitment together by God to raise the kids together. So that means they are relying off each other's ideas and having that trust for each other. And yes, there will come a time where there are some disagreements between the two, and if there is a time where this comes up, then it's the parents' duty to talk it over and reach an agreement between each other and compromise their ideas. And now we come to the E of mess-ups. The second way to mess up the dad is by reaching through the kids' emotions. In other words, joking towards your kids in a way that would be considered hurtful towards them. So, of course, this sort of comes up every day, not just between fathers and kids, but you make a joke towards them that, even if you don't mean it to sound hurtful, you joke about them because of, their weight, or because of their hair, because of their height, and it'll basically be something that the kids would take offense to. How do you think they're going to feel about that? So, you really want your child to love you the way that you love them, and you want your love to really come out and really show towards the way you speak to them, and making jokes towards them that will hurt their feelings will really make them think negatively of you. But there are, of course, some times when you just gotta say it, and you just have to speak the truth, no matter how hurtful it is, but you really have to do it in a helping way. Like, if a person asking you, does this outfit make me look fat? You don't just say, yes, it does make you look fat. Try instead saying, well, I think maybe if you want to make yourself look presentable, maybe you could wear something like this instead if you want to look a certain way. Just say in a helping, loving fashion, and not in a joking, offensive fashion. And the third way to mess up as a dad is by shouting, which would mean raising your voice to the point where it actually scares your children. So this happens all the time with fathers, and everyone can relate to it. The child does something that just absolutely flips your lid, and you just get so angry and so infuriated that the only way you can get that out of you is just by yelling at your kids and saying stuff to them that you wouldn't normally say to them. And how do you think they feel about that? So you really don't want your kids to be afraid of you. You need to reach out to them using your real emotions, not just your anger. Your anger is going to make them not want to be around you because they just see you as some big scary monster and not the gentle, understanding father that they want you to be. And now the fourth way is the second S of mess-ups, which is, in other words, that special someone. In other words, this is not getting involved in your son or daughter's romantic relationships. So it is a very deep subject, especially when your kids become teenagers. They start to develop spontaneous romantic emotions for people of the opposite gender, and they start to really want to be with that person a lot. And situations like that where they really need to have you there in the picture when they go off and do whatever, and if they don't have you there, then they don't have the proper mature guidance to lead them down the right path. Where do you think that's going to lead? So the world of sex, love, and teen dating are all extremely world-driven, and it's very hard for a non-Christian to see the Christian side of the love life between opposite genders. And with teenagers, since their brains are still developing and they're sort of being introduced into the world of an adult, they really need to have that spiritual guidance to lead them down that difficult subject. And your advice would really be helpful for helping your son or daughter because you've been through this. You're married. So you've been through all the dating stuff. You know all about how to handle the steps along the way. And the fifth way, how you can mess up as a dad, is continued off the special someone, which is quite the opposite of not getting involved. It's getting too involved in romantic relationships. So instead of just not getting involved and not knowing what your kid and the other person is doing, you decide instead become the overprotective father and follow your kids everywhere. And you go with them to the movies or to dinner, or you stay with them in the room to make sure they're having that safe boundary between each other. How do you think your son or daughter feels about you? So yes, you want to make sure that your kid is safe with this other person and they don't go past that boundary that you agreed on, but you also need to allow space for your kid to really have one-on-one time with their significant other. And it's not a good idea to always interfere with them and risk embarrassing your son or daughter with stuff that used to be cool when you were their age. And now the sixth way, how you can mess up as a dad, is taken by the hyphen of mess-ups. If you just slant it 90 degrees, you get I, which is for interests, which would mean forcing your interests onto your son or daughter. So let's say that when you were in high school, you used to really love to play baseball. Well, you just loved it so much that you wanted your family to continue that legacy because you were just so awesome in it. You hit every home run. You won all these trophies and you stored them all in your room and you're just so prideful of all of them, and you really want your son to fulfill that, and you just want to see him really make Pop proud. So, against his wishes, you sign him up for Little League Baseball. How do you think he feels about that? So, a very important thing to remember is that God has entrusted every unique being with their own unique talents to serve their own purpose in the world. God has given us all our own talents, and He's given us our own talents for our own reason to build up His kingdom. If we all had the same talents, then we wouldn't have much of a kingdom to build up. It would just be the kingdom of baseball or the kingdom of video games and not just the kingdom of God. And it's not your job as a father to decide what your son or daughter is interested in. It's God's job to show them what they're best at and what they should pursue. And of course, there's also the usual motif of just suggesting something to them and being all we'll just try and see if you like it. But if they decide they don't like it, then don't force it on them anymore. They'll go pursue something else. But if they decide they like it, then, well, congratulations. That means you're doing your job. And now the seventh way is actually continued off the interests, which means not showing any attention to your son or daughter's interests. So let's say that your son walks home from school one day and he's just super excited because he just learned how to play Beethoven's Fourth Symphony on the trumpet. And you're just sitting there on the couch with the paper in your hand and a cup of coffee in the other, and you've got the game on, and you're just really absorbed into what you're doing, and you're just like, yeah, that's great, whatever. Go tell your mom about it. And you just don't really care about this achievement that your son just made. How do you think he feels? So you need to remember that the relationship between a father and child is very core to raising a family, and the best way to raise that bond. So you probably don't have any interest of trumpet, but if your son does, then it would be good for you to develop an interest of that so you could learn more about what your son is interested in. And in return, you can tell him a little about the work you do, no matter how unexciting it may be. But at least you're still forming that connection with each other and finding a way to relate to each other. And trust me, explaining what you do for work, along with learning about what your kid likes doing, is a really great way to form conversations. And now the U of mess-ups stands for unruly, which would mean doing things that you don't want to see your kids doing at any point in their lives. So let's say that as a way of relaxing yourself, you walk home from work, you've been working 9-hour shifts, and you're really tired, and your 7-year-old son has some friends over, and your mom has some of the PTA moms over, and your daughter has a friend over, and just right there on the couch, to relax yourself, you just take out some tobacco and just start chewing it, and you don't care what everyone else thinks about the impression that you're making upon all the guests. And what do you think happens after that? So, one thing to remember is the father needs to be the role model for his children. He is there, entrusted by God, to show them right from wrong. In other words, make them disciple makers. He is showing them how a good Christian man really needs to just show God's love to the world, which would mean not chewing tobacco and taking care of himself, taking care of others, just living the way Jesus did. And if you're portraying that to your children, then they're going to pick that up. Because even if you don't realize it, your kids really do pay attention to everything that you do. And what you do always affects them later in life. And now the P of mess-ups, the ninth way to mess up the dad, is by misprioritizing, which means you are not setting the right priority straight for a Christian man's life. The correct priority for your life should be to set God first, then your wife second, then your kids third, and your job fourth. So the job part is really important in this, to set last above your family. And let's just say that you decide to just miss out on your son's last baseball game of the season, and this is a very important game to him, and this is just the greatest day of his 8-year-old life, and it's very important for him that you show up, but you decide that work's more important, and you just go to work to do the same thing that you always do every day, and you're missing out on the one big day of your son's life, even though you've already missed half of your other son's games. How do you think he feels? So, living the life of a Christian man means you put God above everything else. Along with that, the commitment that you've made with your wife, and that relationship that you have with your children, and everything else, including your job, needs to go after that. Because it's really been a common problem with men nowadays. They think work is so important to them that they're not thinking about their families, and they just leave God out of the picture. Yes, obviously, work is important. You do need to get a job to get money to support your family. And yes, getting a job is definitely mandatory for a successful life. But one thing you need to keep in mind is you won't have your job forever. There will be a time where you'll retire, and you'll be living in a retirement home, just unemployed for the rest of your life. But that commitment you made with your wife and your children, that's going to stay with you until the day you die. It always will. And now we've come to the last and most important way you could mess up as a dad is through making your kids sweat. In other words, this would mean making your kids work to earn your love. Let's say that you will only tell your child that you will love them, and you will only show signs that you love them if they do something good that will satisfy you. And how do you think your kids feel about that if you won't love them until they do something for you? One story from the Bible that I like to bring up is the story of Jesus and Zacchaeus. So Zacchaeus was a man from Jericho who was just a really greedy tax collector, and he was basically the most hated man around, and no one really wanted to be around him because he was just always taking everyone's stuff. And then one day Jesus was passing through Jericho, and since Zacchaeus was pretty short, he had to climb up this sycamore tree to take a look at Jesus. And then Jesus looked up at him and said, "Zacchaeus, come down. I'd like to spend the night with you." And then Zacchaeus came down, and he was happy that Jesus wanted to spend the night with him. But everyone else was confused because he wanted to spend the night with a sinner. But then after that night, Zacchaeus just came out and he was giving away all his stuff to everybody. He was just being completely selfless because Jesus spent the night with him. And then Jesus went out and said to him that he didn't come down to earth to hang out with those who were worthy of his grace. He came down here to save those who need to be saved because he has unconditional love for others. And because God shows unconditional love, the Father must do the same for his children and love them no matter what. Because we are his disciples, and we are creating love between all nations. Love is really the key to any father-child relationship, and this is a very important point in life that should not ever be overlooked. And those are the 10 ways how you could mess up as a dad. Thank you very much for listening. My name is Trevor Pacelli. My father's name is Lonnie Pacelli. And I hope you have a wonderful day and keep point of all these that you've learned. Thank you and goodbye.